I'm very excited to have some amazing panelists here. These are like my heroes, so you'll get to meet them all shortly. But we are going to talk about co-design today and sharing power as designers. So I'm Sara Cantor. I will introduce myself as we go. Once again, thanks for coming. So we're going to start with a shared definition of power. I think of power as the ability to change someone else's reality, maybe another person's or even maybe your own, right? Now, while power can sometimes feel icky in our culture, and it does get a bad rap because of how often it's abused, at a fundamental level, power is neither good nor bad. It just is. And in fact, it's really important. We can't shy away from power if we want to talk about social change, right? So who has power? One way we can think about this is organized people and organized money. So institutions like businesses and government hold power, as do grassroots movements. All of us have some power, at least over some aspects of our own realities. But, as I'm sure we all are keenly aware, power is unequally distributed in our society. So there's no science, there's no biological basis that says that white, straight, cisgender, heteronormative American men are the right ones to be in charge of government and business. And yet, in our society, we have chosen to perpetuate a slew of cultural and structural traditions that keep these various identities in power. We see the rich get richer, we see the racial wealth gap grow. And so without an intervention, this is the track we're on, right? So we think about an intervention. We think about this concept at a very high level of equitable social change. And it would seem that at the highest level, we need to see a redistribution of power. So I know this is a very simplistic idea. We will talk about it in more detail. But typically the idea of a redistribution of power gets a lot of head nods, right? People in the social sector are like, yeah. That's what we gotta see. We gotta see that. So what does this have to do with design? Well, a shared definition of design is going to be hard to come by at a conference like this, but I will give one take, something that's always stuck with me since I went to the Institute of Design about, 100 years ago. Design is the tangible realization of intent, right? So it's taking our intentions, our goals, and it's turning them into something tangible. In fact, something that may change someone else's reality, right? And so what I'm getting at is that design holds inherent power. Because another way to think about design is that it's a structured process of making decisions. Designers work with clients and stakeholders. We facilitate a whole series of decisions, right? From what problem should we solve, to who should we learn from, to what did we learn, to what are we gonna do about it? That's kind of how designers, and then all the way down to, for example, if we're talking about the built environment, what building should go on this corner? What should it include? If we're talking about the digital environment, what should this website say? How does the navigation work? When I click here, what happens? All of those are design decisions, right? And so by moving our clients through the series of decisions, we're generating a sort of power. And not only that, but we, as designers, have the ability to extend power through our projects to others. So this might be kind of a cheeky way to say it or a little bit goofy, but I think about co-design as extending the power of design, the decision-making power of design, beyond the client, beyond who's paying you. Bringing others into the process in order to, number one, make the design itself better, and number two, redistribute some of the power that's been concentrated in the designer-client relationship. So I'll give a quick sidebar intro. I'm a co-founder and co-executive director of Greater Good Studio. We are a design firm advancing people-centered social change through our research and design projects with nonprofits, foundations, and government. And when we say people-centered, we're not talking about our clients. We are talking about their communities, the people they serve. We want to make their work in housing and public health and education, community development, we want to make it better and more people-centered, more true to their missions, right? More informed by their end users. And so we bring aspects of co-design, aspects of the redistribution of power into every project. Now, our clients are already like on the same page with us. They are all working for an equitable society. And yet, in the 13 years since I've started the studio, I've noticed some barriers that get in the way of that redistribution of power, which we all claim to want. So I've put together a short list of barriers to co-design. Some of these are more emotional, while some of these are more logistical. I think they are all swept up in each other. So on the emotional side, for starters, you have denial. I don't have any power to share. I barely have any power myself. How could I possibly share it with others? And it is uncomfortable if you're someone who does hold some institutional power to acknowledge that, because if I have power, why haven't I solved the problems, right? There's also quality, and I put quality in quotes, because this shows up sometimes as, well, if we bring others into this design process, like, what if they do a bad job, right? Who are we gonna hold accountable? Like, I'm on the line for this, right? Now, I would argue that the quality argument is often a proxy for other forms of bias, right? So, for example, it's often the case that clients are white and co-designers are folks of color. And in our white supremacist society, white people have been taught to have low expectations for people of color, right? Similarly, people who are highly educated tend not to value lived experience the same way as they do their own learned expertise. So all of that hides within that concern about quality, right? And then we also have insecurity, unfortunately. What if our co-designers actually do a great job? Will I look bad? Should I not have been doing this all along? So because these emotional barriers are just often hiding below the surface, I think we typically more hear about the logistical barriers. And the logistical barriers are easy to blame. They're also real. Compensation. How are we going to pay people? We have these legal guidelines. We have these ethical guidelines. If we pay people too much, it'll interfere with their benefits. How are they going to pay their taxes? Yada, yada, yada. There's also timing, like, we want to meet during the day. People aren't free. They want to do nights and weekends, or we want to do a one-day workshop and nobody can take off that much time from their work. Sometimes it's just technology barriers. We want to do a Zoom call, but maybe co-designers in our community don't have the means to do a Zoom call. I believe that these barriers are real. I also believe they're totally surmountable, and I think they are completely insignificant when compared to the scale of the avoidable suffering in our country due to inequitable systems, programs, and policies. So in order to use our power as designers responsibly, we can and we must move past them. So how do we do that? Well, I went to the Institute of Design, and we think a good 2x2 will save the world. So this is a framework for how we approach co-design at greater good, otherwise known as redistributing power through design. It builds off of Sherry Arnstein's Ladder of Civic Participation and other frameworks that have kind of a single spectrum around low to high power. However, we made it a 2x2 because, again, Institute of Design. But also, I think there's a second spectrum that's important to consider. So we have low to high power for co-designers, and we also have low to high effort, because the amount of effort we're asking is actually really important and kind of determines what that role is, what that job is for a co-designer. So a high level of power would be where co-designers are making substantive, strategic decisions about the project's direction, whereas a low level of power might be a role where co-designers are providing input, but they don't have decision-making abilities. A high level of effort would be a role where co-designers are spending a long time on the project. Maybe the work is ambiguous, it's physically or emotionally taxing. Whereas a low level of effort would be a role where, they're spending little time, the work is relatively straightforward. So you can start to imagine, these different types of roles. And we've kind of codified this as 4 models, 4 ways that we can co-design. From the bottom left to the top right, we've got power is supplemented, power is spread, power is shared, and power is shifted. And I'm going to share an example of each of them. But before that, a couple things to note about this framework. First of all, none of these is like good or bad, better or worse. The top right isn't always appropriate. What is always appropriate is designing a project that's going to meet the client's needs while also responding to the interests and the capacities of the people that we're working with. Oops. The other thing to note is that this line is about 45 degrees, right? We are always trying to align the amount of power with the amount of effort. So, bottom right, lots of power, no work, sounds great. We've never been able to pull it off. Top left, high effort, low power, that's exploitation. Like, we're not doing that. So we want to kind of keep it on that line, right? I'll share an example of each of these types of projects, what it's great for, kind of a little bit about how you do it. My hope is that this provides a set of examples and some really concrete ideas for those of us who might be getting stuck on the barriers. Then we will shift to our amazing panel and have a conversation about what sharing power means to them. So the first model, power is supplemented. We call this project participants. This is basically your typical human-centered design process. We start with research, meet people where they are, learn about their lives, but then we invite them back again to a brainstorm, to a workshop, to a prototype feedback session. We make it low effort for them to participate, give gift cards, provide food and childcare, have events at centrally located spots. For example, this is Beverly, someone who we shadowed for a day in California, and then she attended an ideas workshop. Now, this is still low power for someone like Beverly. The client was still making all the decisions. Their eyes were being opened through new inputs. And I would suggest that this approach is a great way to dip a toe into co-design. Like, if you're already doing research with people, bring them back and have them weigh in on the research and on the ideas. They're mostly just being asked to be experts in their own lives, which is amazing, and it puts them in contact with the client, which is a great first step. So this is kind of our low effort, low power, but it's better than nothing. Next, power is spread. So this is an advisory group. We can kind of imagine how this works. This is a human-centered design project with an additional formalized role, project advisors. So what you do is you bring a group of people together and you ask them to weigh in collectively at strategic points throughout the design process. So this was an advisory group that we convened for a project focused on global learning. Now, with an advisory group, we always advocate for some kind of written agreement in order to ensure that everyone has the same expectations for time, for compensation. And of course, remember our timing barrier, it can be hard to find a time. You can book these things out weeks or months in advance. You can use Doodle, you can do every meeting twice. There's lots of ways to make this accessible for advisors. What's nice is that even though this is still kind of mid to low power, the client is working together with the advisory group. So some decisions are made collaboratively. And this group can serve as a bridge between the client and their community because they're more likely to build these ongoing working relationships. I think this approach is great for clients who have relationships with folks in their field and they want to honor their expertise in a more long-term way. The third level we call project ambassadors. So this is similar to the advisory group, except now it's a little higher effort and a little higher power. Ambassadors actually conduct some of the human-centered design work themselves. They might conduct research, host workshops, or gather feedback on prototypes. Not just give feedback, but actually go gather feedback from their communities. This is a group of project ambassadors we convened for a project on Chicago arts and culture, and they each convened a session with their communities to talk about how arts and culture could dismantle white supremacy. Because this is a higher effort, we provide ambassadors with a contract. So they're compensated at a higher rate, and we provide them with the training and tools to be able to do that work. So there's a capacity building component as well. This group does come together for some specific decisions, sometimes with the client and sometimes without. So this approach is great when you're trying to reach communities that you might not be as close to, and in situations where the client might be totally ready to share their power, but co-designers maybe don't have as much time and capacity as you would hope. Finally, power is shifted through what we call design teams. This is where the client says, I believe the people in my community know what's best for them, and so I'm gonna use my dollars and influence to empower them to go through a human-centered design process from start to finish. So we've put together design teams comprised of local leaders who have professional and personal stakes in the work. We give them the training and tools. We facilitate their decision-making along the way. Essentially, as designers, we treat them like the client, except that we're paying them instead of them paying us. Now, design teams is a high level of effort. This was a project that we did in 6 communities across the US. Each design team spent 3 2-day workshops with us and had a bunch of stuff to do in between. They signed contracts, they were fully compensated, and we planned out their participation to remove as many barriers as possible. This approach is for the client who really trusts their community and is secure enough to know that the work will be better if they just frame the project strategically and get out of the way. Now, as you can see, all of these project models, can be effective, can be powerful. They're all relevant for different circumstances. I think the overall, hope is that through these methods, clients can say, I see how you've gotten over those logistical barriers, and maybe now I'm starting to get over some of those emotional barriers, because co-design as a way to share my power is both more equitable and more effective. Thank you. So I'm going to transition us over here. And we are going to have a chat. Thank you all. So I would love to start by having each of our panelists introduce themselves, and we're going to do a little bit of a different kind of intro. I'd love to know a little bit about each of you, your life's work. Tell us what you do. But then I'd also love to know about a time when you felt powerful, and also about a time when you felt powerless. And I'm wondering if Leslie would like to kick us off.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Leslie Kennedy. Nice to see all of you. Happy Saturday. I am a birth worker. It's so cool to say that out loud. Absolutely. Because that is a new way to describe what I do in the world. I was a part of Greater Good Studios' design process, people-centered design process, when I worked with the Girl Scouts of Greater Chicago and Northwest Indiana. And I didn't know it then, but I was on a 3-year exit strategy out of the nonprofit industrial complex. And I didn't know it, but here I am. So I have worked at the helm of many nonprofits and in philanthropy for the past 25 years, in mostly youth development, which I love. I love young people, always have. I was in AmeriCorps, I did all the things, kind of that cut your teeth early in AmeriCorps and then just do the nonprofit youth development journey. But I've always, I think I look back at my high school book and it said, what do you want to be? And I put obstetrician. I was a senior. I got very average grades. There was no way I was going to be an obstetrician. However, there was some kind of seed in me. In my very first pregnancy, I have 3 beautiful, beautiful young people, young adults now. My very first pregnancy, I was transported into a completely different time and era and space. And I threw everything I knew, everything I could into understanding what my body was moving through and what I could do. Talk about power, right? So to, I guess, segue into the double-click question. So let me just say real quick. So I just love birth work, always have. And I tried to walk this fine line between dipping my toe in midwifery school while I was leading nonprofit organizations throughout my life. I tried twice and just couldn't. I had 3 babies, like all the things, right? And so about a year and a half ago, I quit that job at Girl Scouts. I was chief equity officer, right? And took it, I think I was sitting on my couch doing really nothing, healing, honestly, I was healing. And Spirit just spoke to me, like, right now, why not now? Why not now? And so I called my instructor, who I had this probably 8-note chain over the last 15 years with, email chain. And I was like, here I am again. Can I try now? Within 2 weeks, I was back in class with a full ride scholarship on the board of the new Chicago Southside Birth Center. And in about 3 months after that, I was hired as the director of strategy. Right? You talk about alignment. So that's what I do, is I'm helping to build the first Black midwife-led birth center on the south side of Chicago. Insane. Living the absolute dream, my literal high school dreams. And I didn't even have to study that hard. I'm back in midwifery school to be a certified professional midwife. And I'm sitting here, we met a few days ago, and I've really been thinking about this question of shared power and what it means to be powerful and how to share and redistribute power. And I think the time when I felt the most powerful was in labor, literally conspiring with my God to bring life to the world, right? Like, that's power that is shared by me and my Creator, right? And this wonderful, magical human that they and I had to dance to get here, to bring them here. And when I felt powerless was as a doula, right? So I'm doula as part of my practicum for midwifery school. As a doula, you're with woman, you're with the birthing person, right? You can do nothing but support them to feel powerful. So for me, that's my redistribution, where I just sit back, do all the things, right, to support them to feel as powerful as possible so that they could then conspire with their God to bring a new human to the world, right? Thank you.
Thank you.
Ahmed?
Yes, so good morning, everybody. My name is Ahmed Jatan. So my current role, not my life's work, but my current role is I'm the director of organizing at the Inner City Muslim Action Network, also known as Iman, on the south side of Chicago. We also have a branch in Atlanta. I would describe my life's work, and I pray that every day my role, if it's into my life's work, is the work of liberation. And I see that as my own personal liberation spiritually, and what that means to feel free in my body as well. And also the liberation of my people, and I define that as my people as Palestinians, as Muslims, but also my people as my neighbors, as humanity, and also the way that humanity affects our environment as well too. And the way that I see that liberation work for myself is, as an educator, as an organizer, and also as a poet and a storyteller. So that's what I see as my life's work. And that has taken me in so many different ways, took a very similar path in terms of with youth development, and that has taken me all around the world in terms of what that looked like as a professional journey, but also as a personal journey. Having the opportunity to work with young people in North Carolina, in New York, in Palestine, in refugee camps in Lebanon, and finding myself back in Chicago as well to continue that work. I think for myself, a moment where I felt powerless, or times where I feel powerless, is times when I'm trying to get my head around, feel in my heart, especially in this moment, trying to comprehend the unfolding genocide that's happening in Palestine, and feeling powerless of what can I do to stop this. I can go to a protest. I can have call my congressperson. I can sit in a room facing my congressman and still feel like, what can I do? We can have masses of people, I can trials, and it still can sometimes feel powerless. And then I think where I feel powerful, and I think of a moment I even had this morning. One of the many programs that we do at EMAN is every Saturday morning we have a breakfast at dawn. So we gather at 5 a.m. And it's residents from our housing program, who are in our reentry program, so those returning home from incarceration, as well as community members and others who are just looking for that healing space. And I think what happens in that space, and very similar to what you were saying, it's an opportunity to be able to connect with Creator. It's a multi-faith space as well. So, that's a time where Muslims traditionally do their first prayer of the day, but it's a time that's also across cultures across the world is recognized as a very spiritually sensitive time, because most people are asleep or just getting to start their day. And what it does if you start your day with that intention and collectively. And what we do is, some people will do formal prayers and read from their different traditions, but then we come together in a circle and just ask each other, what is on your heart? What do you want us to pray for you this week? And it's an opportunity not just to be able to beseech the Creator and beseech each other for that assistance, but to be able to build those bonds together too. And I think that's where the power comes from. So even, in that moment, I was able to share in terms of some of that powerlessness that I'm feeling in this moment. But then where the power comes from is in this sphere that I'm in now. If we have any hope of changing anything, climate crisis, genocide, racism, right, sexism, the only hope that we have to be able to tackle any of these things is the strength of the bonds that we have starting at the neighborhood level with the people that we interact with every day. So that's where I feel powerful.
Oh my God, you guys are both terrific. My name is Nicole Robinson, and I am the CEO of the YWCA of Metro Chicago. I live in Bronzeville. That's very close to here. I'm a product of what I call the 4 Ps: public schools, public libraries. That was my after-school program. I terrorized the librarians. Public parks. That was my summer program. So I went to the free day camps. And then I would say public benefits. So I know what it's like to get public benefits. I know what it's like to go to the store it was food stamps back then. And that's important for me to share just because I lead an organization that is trying to make Chicago better, trying to support people and help them reach their full potential, help them achieve and tap into their own power. I didn't jump right into this space. I actually was the kid looking in, wanting some power, right? Because I would see some people make it and some people don't. It was before we had terms like equity, before we talked about power sharing. I was just looking and I was curious and I was like, well, how do I get some of that? So I did what a lot of people do. You go to school, you try to get a job, you do things like that. And I spent 19 years in corporate America. I started my career in finance. So I share these things just because there's all these dimensions of power at the community level, in institutions, in faith organizations, in nonprofits, in governments. Every sector, like your framework, could be, the audience could be every single industry and sector that we have, not just designers. So as you were speaking, I was like, I think I'm a designer. Because maybe I'm a little bit of a designer of how we share power, right? So I share a little bit of that. Let me circle back. I spent a little time with, after leaving corporate America, with the Greater Chicago Food Depository, 5 years there. And I would just mention in the corporate space, I went from finance to leading corporate social responsibility. So when corporations are trying to do good and try to share a little power, but even, it's not perfect. And so I had some experience there. And then fast forward, and with Greater Good, we actually worked on some power sharing work, because that's a sector that there's a lot of inequity in who has power, and it's built in. It's built into the system. And then today I feel like this organization I get to lead, get to be a part of, that has a mission of eliminating racism and empowering women. We're 148 years old. That mission itself is only a little over 50 years old, but it's rooted in sharing power. It is completely, I'll tell that. Does anybody want to ask me later how a group of black women organized across the United States and went to a meeting in Texas and said, we're going to talk about how racism is what we need to deal with if we want to overcome anything. So I feel like I stand on the shoulders of all these cool people before me. So getting to your question about power, that's part of what I do every day. I can't, probably in my job description I need to put, designer or sharer of the power, because there's 300 people who work at the YWCA. There's thousands of families who rely on us. We're in a dozen different communities across Cook County, Lake County, and DuPage County. So it's like that's my main responsibility, to ensure they have everything they need to win. And when I think about our measure for our success as an organization, we do 3 big things. We unleash the potential in young people, from early childhood to teen girls. So we got to give them power every day to make that happen. We help people heal and belong. And what I mean by that, we have therapists who counsel people from 5 to 85. Again, art therapy, individual therapy, all forms of therapy. Everybody is hanging on a string. Everyone is, and black and brown people are on the margins of everything. So I just feel like, they need that power and the healing. And then the last thing we do is around economic, what I call equity. Sometimes we say empowerment, but I say equity just because it does require a shift. And then for me personally, I feel like when I think about my whole life, I'm in and out of feeling powerful and powerless all the time. And I know sometimes we think that if I get to this point, I'm suddenly powerful. Nope, I'm constantly, because there are all these bubbles as a society. We're not good at sharing power. We're actually really bad at it. And our whole structure is built on domination. So even as I'm the kid from the South Side who gets institutionalized into some of these ways, because we all do. And then you go back and forth between moments of power. I feel powerful when I'm unleashing the potential in someone. That's when I feel most powerful. I'm least powerful when I feel like the system is pulling me to do something else. Right, and you make those trade-offs, because I have 300 people who need to get their paychecks. That's real. We want to make payroll. So do I do what's best for one, or do I do what's best for 300 people who got to take care of their family? So I would say that's when I feel like, ooh, I don't feel so powerful now.
Yeah. Thank you. I really appreciate that. And I think it was something we talked about with Ahmed and Leslie too, the idea that like none of us is just always powerful or always powerless, but that we kind of go back and forth in these moments and day to day. I'm thinking like you run the YWCA, surely you like put your feet up and say, yeah, like I'm making the shots. But yeah, I can very much relate to the fear of the payroll. As a you want it to happen, and you're gonna fight for that. So it sounds like, and each of you talked so beautifully about the ways that you feel the power that you have, that you use the power that you have, and also sometimes the ways that that systems or structures or even the bureaucracy, the power structure that we have, a congressman like can't do something, like the ways that we can't always move someone else's reality. I guess I'm curious, if you could maybe either share an example or a kind of situation where you were enabled to share your power, because what I'm kind of looking for is what are the conditions that allow us or encourage us to do that more, to do that better? And I know it's a little abstract, but I bet y'all have some examples in mind. So whoever wants to jump in.
I can start.
Yeah.
So I can speak a little bit more about what some of the work at EMAN looks like, and even what initially drew me, even as a student when I first heard about EMAN's work, to some of their framework. So in general, EMAN's mission is geared towards health, wellness, and healing, and we do that first by, of course, running a federally qualified health center and other programs, like I mentioned, the reentry, as well as in integrating arts and culture through arts and culture programming. But we also do that through organizing for social change. And one of the most longstanding campaigns that we've had at EMAN is the Corner Store campaign. So if you're from Chicago, or really if you're from most any urban area, you're familiar with this phenomenon of what sociologists call the middleman minority, where often in black neighborhoods, there's another minority that often occupies the role of running the kind of small retail corner stores, bodegas, food and liquor stores in the neighborhoods, and oftentimes, generating tensions across communities and exacerbating issues of food access and food justice, as well as community violence. I think one way that the whole nation, the whole world was reminded of this was during the murder of George Floyd, which happened outside of an immigrant-run and actually a Palestinian-run corner store in Minneapolis. So the ways that already you can begin to see that this campaign wasn't just about food, although we have to talk about the food that's on the shelves. But really what it's about is about the relationships. So to me, one of the ways that was about sharing power is that one of the other things that the system does is very effective because of this capitalist structure and because of this kind of scarcity mindset and the unhealed trauma that's across communities, that it pits communities against each other. So the situation is set up where there is a kind of tension between, pick your immigrant group. I mean, if you're talking about early 90s in LA, Koreans and black folks. In Chicago, what comes to the tension to the front a lot of times is between Arabs, Palestinians in particular, who I wouldn't even say run the plurality, but run a good amount of corner stores, the South and West Sides, food and liquor stores, and black folks. Which, if you were to think about the histories of those two communities, should be natural allies. But there's no opportunity for that connection to happen. So for me, that's one of the ways where the power is shared. And that campaign started off, and EMAN started off just as a volunteer-run health center running these campaigns just on a volunteer basis. Have been able to build up to the point where now it's a federally qualified health center and build up our base as well, and build up the capital that we have. That when the campaign started in terms of having interventions at local corner stores led by the residents who are having to shop at these stores, alongside allies from the community who are deeply invested in this idea of how do we tackle the issue of food justice and community safety in our neighborhoods, and how am I accountable, how am I holding my community accountable to these issues. I've been able to build up to the point of having a network of these stores that are committed to it, and at the same time recognizing that we're still hitting a wall, that because of the way that the generations of disinvestment and racism and those obstacles that are there. But been able to reach a point now of creating the North Star of opening up our own corner store as a model on 63rd and Racine in the Inglewood neighborhood. And this intervention didn't start just from there. And I could speak more about, okay, what was the design process of even getting to the point of what does the store look like? What's in this store? Well, how does this store function more than just a store, but as a community center, right? The intervention also is beyond food, because again, we're looking at the holistic health, wellness, and healing. For those who don't know, there was a study done by the NYU School of Medicine looking at life expectancy gaps across the United States in major urban centers, and Chicago had the largest life expectancy gap. And the two neighborhoods that had that gap was Inglewood, where the store is located, in Streeterville. A 30-year life expectancy gap. That you're expected to live 30 years longer just 10 miles north in Streeterville than you do in Inglewood. So there are so many factors that go into that. Chronic diseases being one of the major factors, and of course what you eat being a contributing factor to those chronic diseases. But in addition, what else was at that intersection at 63rd and Racine? A Green Line station that was closed in the mid-90s for renovations has not been opened up, and since that time we know there have been other renovations done in other stations, so it's possible to do. And I think if you're in this room, you know why it hasn't been done yet. And one of the things, as we know, is power concedes nothing without a demand. So that requires collectivizing and making that demand very clear, which we were able to do, at least the first phase of that, of getting a local referendum, which passed with 93%, and already as a result of that, being able to get a commitment, at least for a feasibility study from the CTA, and we have to keep pushing. What else is at that intersection? A closed CPS school that was closed during the term of Rahm Emanuel, like dozens of other schools across the city that are there as a potential community asset, but sitting as vacant real estate, right? So when we're thinking about even just the design problems of urban planning and what could be done there and the way to involve community. So to rewind, and to answer the question, it's those kind of very concrete campaigns, and it can start even just at one intersection of being able to see what's actually a problem and being able to shift that, and or pivot, for those who are familiar with the 4 pivots, pivoting what can be a problem into an opportunity. This problem of black-brown tension is actually an opportunity for black-brown solidarity to build a neighborhood with the people in mind.
Oh, good. Yes. Yes. I think similarly, right, with the maternal health crisis that we are in and have been in for a really long time, and folks starting to, really wake up, and women, particularly black women, paying voice to their experiences. Here in Chicago, there are 3 birth centers in Chicago currently, and the Chicago Southside Birth Center will be the 4th. There's one in kind of like Ravenswood-ish, Lincoln Park area, Chicago Birth Center, which is a for-profit model. There's one further north, Burr Ridge North, another for-profit model. And then there's PCC Wellness on the west side, which is a federally qualified health center, and the Chicago South Side model will be a nonprofit model. There was a law that wouldn't extend the ability to build a birth center on the South Side, right? That law had to change. So talk about, right, like how we collectively, strengthen the understanding of folks who may not even feel like they're in that political mindset, or maybe feel powerless that they can shift the law, change the law, right, to be able to, kind of even cultivate the vision to create a different option for women, particularly black women on the South Side. And that happened. It had to happen. We had to change the law in order to develop. You shared a term that I tried to lock in my brain, the brick and mortar, right? Physical design.
The built environment.
Built environment, right? So now we've moved from the visionary space to the built environment, and understanding design coincides with vision, right? Boots on the ground, changing laws, being able to support folks to feel powerful enough to do that. And I came in late, right? This is Janine Valerie Logan. Remember her name, Janine Valerie Logan, who is the founder and lead steward of the Chicago Southside Birth Center. She's done it, right, along with partners. And so the physical space has been purchased in cash from the community, right? From the community, all that money to purchase that building, right? There were a couple of grants sprinkled in there, but the majority of those funds were raised by the community, who said out loud, we need another option. Black women need another option, a safe option. We will not go to the hospital. We will rather have our babies at home without any assistance. A free birth is what they call it, right? Which is also risky because Black women's birth isn't always, it hasn't been, we haven't evolved in a way that will allow to have a safe free birth often, right? So to have a birth center, freestanding, physical space, built environment, right, in a community that is in such desperate need, led by a Black woman midwife and many others, it's just, I mean, we're living that process right now. So I'm so glad you set that up because I'm still training my brain to think like this, right? But it's absolutely design, shared power, all of the things.
Yeah, yeah, thank you. Do you want to share?
Terrific. You guys are amazing. I'm going to say that again. So one of the things I mentioned at the YWCA is about unleashing youth potential. And I talked about the early childhood ecosystem. You know, childcare is the second largest expense for any family next to rent. The second largest expense. And we all learned during the pandemic to undervalue how undervalued childcare providers were. We pay them the least, yet they're responsible for the first 1,000 days of development that's that window where we don't get it right, we can't get those years back. It's a wrap. We're just struggling trying to catch up. So it's interesting. There's some nonprofits who actually do direct service childcare, like they run a childcare center. We don't do that. I love that. And I love that we don't do it is because the power sits with the 90% of Black and brown women who lead their own home-based childcare or either have a community-based childcare center, right? Because that's a choice point. We could say, we're going to be like this organization and we're going to run childcare centers. We're like, nope. We're actually going to empower the women who do the work every day. And there's not one power thing. To me, there's just multiple power points. And what we do is we have a whole parent and child care advisory council that's all led by women, mothers, aunties, who are passionate about young people and child development. They are not graduates of Erickson Institute, which is a prestigious place of higher learning. They are just people who said, this is my passion, right? Taking care of the babies. YWCA help me figure out how to do that. So we probably support about 250 of these child care providers. There's a council where there's leadership. They're compensated for their leadership. They have decision making. We go after funding for them. So there's probably a couple of $1 million that come to the YWCA that we don't get any of that money. We're just a conduit because oftentimes there are resources for child care providers, for food, for paying higher salaries, for training. Individually, they could not do that on their own because it's an administrative burden, it's crazy. So we are like kind of the middle person who kind of helps them get all of those resources. We help them advocate. So those are the folks who go down to Springfield to advocate. We actually have a state that's actually child care friendly. Not every state is. But they are the ones who do the talking. When we go to an elected official, it's not Nicole talking. It's not anyone on Nicole's team. It's actually the individuals who do the work every day. So to me, it's like all these nuggets of power. It's like when they have ownership, when they grow their own business, to me, that again, that's unleashing power because they actually don't need us to win completely. It's rooted in their own. They've created something for themselves and for their families. So I really love that. I do want to mention one thing just because place. We are down the street from Dearborn Homes. And that's a site where the YWCA team, we have a team of folks who work there every day, Monday through Friday, and they are actually, the residents regularly go through what is it that they want for themselves. And I mention them just because I think a lot of times when people think about public, they forget that it's still there. It's like people, I think I was talking to someone when I came here. I drive past this building all the time, but I've actually never been in this building. And I'm sure people drive past Dearborn Homes and they don't see them. I just feel making them visible is sharing power. Reminding people that they're there, reminding people that they have dreams, they have goals, they have aspirations. So we have a team member who's actually taking them through their own, we call them community circles, where they get together, they talk about what they want beyond Dearborn Homes, right? Because a lot of times conversations about what do you want for Dearborn Homes, but it's like, no, what do you want beyond Dearborn Homes? What do you want to do, transform? And there's a lot of criticism of public housing, but as we critique things, we can't forget that people are there and how we give them power, because actually ignoring people, looking away, is stripping people of power.
That's right. That's right. Thank you all so much. I'm like a puddle over here. I don't even know what to say. Everything that you've shared is so beautiful today and so inspiring. I do want to take a little time. I think we have 15 minutes or so to see if there are any questions from the room about anything that has been shared so far today, or just to be in conversation with these luminaries. Yeah, Anne. I will do my best to repeat the question. Thank you, Anne, for articulating that. What do we do when people who we might have chance to interact with in our lives are really in their power and don't want to budge? Yeah, that's real. That has happened to me. Gosh, what did I do? Ooh. Do folks have ideas while I think about it?
You build your own.
Yeah.
You build your own. And I already shared the history of the Chicago Southside Birth Center, but that's exactly what is happening, right? We had to build our own, right? Because these structures, I mean, we live in Illinois, in the hub of like Chicago American Academy of Pediatrics and nursing, and I mean, we live in the hub where all of these systems, hospital systems are created, the laws are created, right? And so folks were not on board with building a freestanding birth center in the Black community where we have the worst birth outcomes, right? Not on board. How can you not? Women are literally dying right now on tables, Black women, right? So we had to build our own because we can't have it. We can't have it.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, and I think with that is something that you shared in the beautiful kind of introduction we had to the day, in terms of you got to do that in coalition. And I think part of what that's about too is, and this is kind of maybe the whole spirit of even just community organizing, as well as, I think in this conversation we've been talking a lot in terms of how do you like share power as like a process. But I think part of that too is building organization, building institutions that then can also hold that power is part of what it is, and also the way that coalitions can also share and hold that power as well too. And I think sometimes you can build your own, sometimes you still, even when you build your own, have to confront that power. Then it's a matter of just escalating the tactics. You can start off the negotiation, but again, if they're really in it and they're not responding to negotiation, you escalate until you get the response that you need.
Yeah, and I would say, this might be a little philosophical, but power is not a zero-sum game. I know that person maybe doesn't believe that. They think that if I have less, if you have more, I have less. But to say, actually, so many of the examples today where I have more power when I have given it away, because it's not a finite resource. There's always going to be someone who, for whatever barrier, is going to try to cling to that power because it's the unnamed thing that everybody is trying to get in our culture. But to, whether it's to go around that person or to go through and to say, if you bring others in, it actually makes you look good. It actually makes you more powerful because now you have more people on your team. I mean, I'm not an organizer, but organized people and organized money moves things. Nicole, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, I just say I believe in an inside game and an outside game right now. So I do think it is start your own. It is build a coalition. It is work within institutions that are still here, because you know, part of me is like, yes, like just share the power, but we're human beings, and we're this legacy of domination. So do we walk away from things we should have? I don't want us to completely walk away. I want us to make our own, build a coalition, and then also keep talking and listening. Let's not be completely polarized. Some people are lost cause, but if they're learning agile, then zero in on that. Don't overwaste your time. But I just think that if we were to just walk away from like that's how we are on a lot of issues. It's either we believe the same thing or we don't, and then we walk away, and we still have these bubbles of people have a lot and we've had some wins, so let's like keep at it.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. It's right. We can't just, exactly. We can't throw people away. Other questions? Yes, and then we'll go here. I'll do my best to repeat the question, but I might need you to supplement what I say. Coming from a big consulting background, spaces where power sharing is not a thing, templates and tools don't exist, how do we kind of create those tools, make those systems work for us better? Yeah. It's a great question. Go, Leslie.
Can I take a real quick stab?
Yeah.
So Greater Good Studio is my example, to be honest with you. It really is. I'm not even trying to be all like, oh, I love you, but I do. Honestly, though, so working at the Girl Scouts, I mean, the Girl Scouts is a wonderful organization for a lot of folks and has been around for 100 and gazillion years, right? So, and for a lot of folks, Girl Scouts works beautifully, and I love that. My time there, we had to shift some things. We had to shift some practices that, I mean, honestly, I think 150 years, 100 and maybe a lot of years, over 100 years, Girl Scouts has been in practice. And it took, I didn't come in with a design framework. I never even heard of human-centered design before I met you, to be real honest with you, right? I played around with organizing, but I couldn't even call myself a true organizer, I didn't think. But it took helping folks understand their own voice, their own power, and we were sharing that power, but I felt just as powerless as the folks who I was working with to change a deeply rooted practice that was holding folks back. I slipped and said black, but it was black folks in Girl Scouts that had to shift their thinking about why they couldn't move past a certain point in the organization, right? And it was very basic tools like draw your vision, right? Draw, make some stick figures, right? And really think about what a collective table might look like. Think about how to use your voice. Think about how to, shift mindsets based on your own personal truth. And there was tactics and ways to do that, and a beautiful design process that Sara and her team took us through. But we shifted, we dismantled a long-standing program and process within the country, right? Because we decided that it didn't work. It was super racist, and it could no longer serve. And I didn't know how to do that. I didn't know what I didn't know. So moving now into, a better sense of kind of conscious competence on how to do that, it took a design process. So thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, and it's not like I've got some magical, kit of parts over here. It's instituted that it's research, and it's saying let's observe and let's actually notice the disparities. Let's notice the distinctions between, this program for mostly white girls and this program for mostly girls of color. And let's have a conversation about that and not have an argument, but let's be productive and generative. Let's draw, let's write, let's ideate, and say, what could it be to solve this problem that we can't ignore because we're looking right at it?
And let me just say, it was super scary. I thought I was going to lose my job every 2 weeks, right? Like, I did. It was super scary because the folks in power in the organization at that time were not used to being challenged, and certainly didn't want to hear anyone say that they were upholding a racist practice, right? That was hard, really, really difficult to shift.
I'll say one more thing, and then Nicole, I see you. I will say that I think human-centered design is a Trojan horse for equity. And I think that as you, as a designer, go about your work, some folks are going to be like, oh, yes, come in because I see the equity in what you're doing. And others are going to say, oh, yeah, human-centered design, Stanford, innovation, cool, cool, cool. Like, we should do that. That's a better idea, right? But either way, you know, you have work to do. And either way, you're going to be elevating the voices of the people who are not being listened to. You're going to tie it to something strategic. You're going to tie it to something market related, whatever you need to do to bring those truths to light. And so we call it human-centered design because it's very palatable, but it's also equity. Did you want to say something? I thought you were.
Just add that for the institutions, I think what Greater Good has been great about is connecting big firms with nonprofits, because sometimes organizations can't have that conversation about human-centered design or equity amongst themselves, but then helping them experience it through another lens is always a great idea. I've had experiences where we've taken corporate executives in community and trying to tell them that your supply chain system is inequitable because the farmers earn the least in the entire system, but them not being able to see it, but then putting them in a different environment, bringing them to Woodlawn community and to talk to residents and hear residents tell them about inequity, and then it suddenly clicks. So there's something about, I think, sharing, helping people in different environments within their own, but also within other people's environments, so that they need that spark.
Yeah, we see that. Thank you for your question. I think we have time for one more, and I know this person's hand was up. Did you want to say a question? Just a simple question about how do we, no, this is like my everyday challenge. The question I'll try to articulate back was to, what are some strategies for giving ourselves the space and time to make the design process more equitable is kind of how I'm thinking about it. Yeah. I mean, I would love to know what folks think because I deal with that every day. I think that, what we often tend to leverage is the difference between people's kind of stated goals and then their expectations. So like their stated goals are typically in my space, they're on the money, right? It's like we want to, create more affordable housing. We want these public health programs to be more accessible. Whatever the project is or whatever the mission of the organization is, there's always an equity mission that's kind of overarching. But I think sometimes, and again, my clients are not thinking like ROI in a financial sense, but certainly we want to see, return on impact. We want to see, changes. And so kind of leveraging or sometimes exploiting the gap, we can say, an equitable process is what brings equitable results. And, again, that might not work for everyone, but to say, if we want to see more people accessing these programs, we have to take the time to listen to the folks who are accessing them today and the folks who are not accessing them today, right? And, you've had a hard time with public meetings. Okay, well, maybe we need to go to where people are. Maybe we need to go in the side door with a trusted advisor, with a partner, as opposed to like holding a meeting and waiting for people to show up at your door. So in lots of ways, I feel like I try to shift the conversation from the results to the process and to show the kind of alignment between those two. And when it doesn't work, I just add budget and time to the proposal and see how it goes. Do others have thoughts? Yeah.
Can I ask you a follow-up question?
Oh, please.
To that? Again, I have this sort of corporate background, but every company who sells a product has with something they call consumer insights.
Sure.
There's a whole team of people, and that's their whole reason for being, is to understand the consumer. What do they care about? How do they think? And they invest millions and millions and millions of dollars into it. How do you, isn't human-centered design just sort of a better way to get insight? Because I would say at the company, I would say, we're getting social insights. We need to invest in getting social insights in order to make this work.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And that's the work I did for about 7 years before Greater Good, was innovation consulting, which essentially is consumer insights. Sometimes a little bit more participatory than, you know, a focus group. We might do an in-home interview. We might do observations, but the argument there is this is just more behavioral and therefore more true than a survey or focus group. But essentially, yes, I mean, human-centered design, anyone at the Institute of Design will tell you, like, yes, of course, human-centered design is just a better version of consumer insights. And so that's kind of the history of this practice. I feel like at Greater Good and at so many other amazing,
But that's
design.
the ROI. You were paying for it already.
Yeah,
So why
yeah.
don't you want to pay for that? That's what I guess.
Oh,
my
I see.
question is. You were paying for it already. So.
My clients aren't, though. Like, my nonprofit clients are not. They don't have
so
the,
that's
you know what I
the
mean?
nonprofit sector. So I'm just pointing this out.
Yeah.
Because that's a bigger sector problem.
Yes.
That doesn't understand the value of that in general.
Yes. For the most part, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, no, we're on the same page. Do you want to jump in?
Yeah, I just want to give you that back because I think it ties to your question around system archetypes. I was going to say every organized body has system archetypes, and it's very much explicitly stated in the language that people are using. So by the fact that you said this is a social net or this is consumer insight, and knowing that the same thing is this is a social insight.
Yeah.
Right? Being able to translate and be able to ask those direct questions in one-on-one situations or in that moment of power, because that's a question that you could theoretically maybe lose your job, putting people on the wrong spot at that moment. But being able to know this is the moment that I can shift this conversation, I think is critical, but also having the language and knowing that every group of bodies has a language to be able to use it, manipulate, shape it, and use it.
If I can add something just to complicate it a little bit, at least from my experience in terms of like community organizing based nonprofit organization, is sometimes, again, you need to know that, but sometimes there is just a limit. And to be able to change that limit, then there needs to be some undergirding policy change that needs to happen. So then you have to then respond to the different incentives that are created from that policy. Something else that I'll say too, just to also complicate this, and maybe it's not answering the question but adding another layer to the question, is oftentimes, you know, what that solution might be when it's designed is, oh, we'll bring in a community partner. And then that's just, okay, they'll take care of it. But then the struggle that happens, and I think for those who are in the nonprofit industrial complex know that even the nonprofits that claim to be the voice of the community and even have that because of just the way that this thing is designed, still aren't really truly accountable to community in certain ways. So that I don't want to end on a hopeless note, right? But just to be able to understand what are the layers to the problem that's happening here. That the solution can't just be we'll get a community partner, because there still has to be some level of accountability of what does that actually mean. And I think at the end of the day, the thing that I remind myself, even in our organization as it's growing too, is I don't need to be the voice for the voiceless. You just pass the mic. So the more, and that's where at base it becomes a values conversation, and that to be able to clarify what are your values, and then how much are what are the actual tangible not just processes, but bodies that you are creating to be able to, again, to hold that, to be able to live into those values. And sometimes it might just be the conversation is just at that values clarification, and it's just like, no, these actually aren't your values, and now it's clear that your values are just efficacy, it's not actually equity, right?
Provide, you have to do the work. Some people will cut the corners
Yeah.
and get a community organizer just so that they can have somebody to say, we have somebody that's talking to the community, right?
Yeah.
But if you really want to do the work, you have to go to the people.
Right.
Give them gift cards. Have them come to this library
Yes.
after they get off work at 6. You know what I mean? You have to do the work. So
Yeah.
it's just about how much work do you really want to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, man. We're going to leave it there. Thank you so much. Thank you for sharing the mic with me today. Thank you, everyone, for this conversation. I hope it continues.